Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Alana and today I am here to share with you my December wrap-up. So I ended up completing 6 books in the month of December, 3 of those being audiobooks. Stat-wise, I have read 1 historical fiction, 2 fantasies, and 3 post-apocalyptic / high fantasy books. So that's kind of cool to look at. I feel like previous months I've had more of a wide reading month, but this month is more just me reading sort of typically what I usually enjoy. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Let's start with my least favorite book and then continue on to my favorite book of the month. So having said that, I'm going to kick this off with Ember and Dusk by Lyra Celine. Now this book and the next book that I'm going to talk about are pretty similar in the fact that they felt like when reading them pretty generic fantasies, both within the YA category. In this one, we have some pretty generic tropes, and they're also tropes that I do enjoy, but when they're not really in an original setting, it just gets a bit boring to read. So let me just start by saying the things that I did enjoy with this, and that this book also got 3 stars from me. Also, sorry that my hair is looking a little ratty, but I washed it and I can't be stuff drying it. Okay, the royalty aspect I did enjoy. There was a court system that had the potential to be amazing, and it sort of was. There was like opposing families and they're 2 different factions within the court, and then just this horrific ruler over all of that. And that was probably the aspect of this book that I liked the most. There were the gowns, there was the excessive beauty of things, and then there was like the cutthroat powers and everything, but just wasn't enough. The main thing I have to say about this book that I didn't like is the writing style. It read very flowery and a bit like, I don't know if the term is purple prose, where it's just like the author just beats the shit out of words to make it seem more regal, and it didn't work for me. The tropes also felt very exhausted to me. We had a bit of a love triangle which felt a bit half-assed. There was also a Rhysand type character, but the Rhysand from like A Court of Thorn and Roses, so the first book, where he's an ass but you know, has the ability to do good. And there was also the chosen one element, but it just, no. So I know I might be sounding a little bit critical of this, and I don't know if that's because maybe my reading tastes have changed. I feel like I'm reading less YA fantasy and enjoying it, and more like high fantasy, more adult genre fantasy, which has more serious consequences and stakes in it. And I think this is just a reflection of that. Like I said, not a terrible book, nothing in here that made me angry or anything like that. I think the problem was it was just forgettable, because looking back, trying to remember my thoughts on this in general, and there wasn't much coming to mind. So yeah, 3 stars for this one. Sorry if you like this book, we just have different opinions. Next up is a similar type book, and that is Onyx and Ivory by Mindy Arnett. You can even sort of tell by the title, Onyx and Ivory, Ember and Dusk. Yeah. This one I enjoyed more than Ember and Dusk, even though it did still get the 3-star rating, and that was because, again, YA fantasy with some characters that read a little bit flat for most of the book. But with this one, I enjoyed the power structure a bit more. There are also abilities in this book, but there is also, again, 2 warring factions. I just feel like I'm repeating myself. But I feel like this one was a little bit more fleshed out, and the character didn't seem as annoying or, you know, flat on the page. The main character, that is. Some of the supporting characters in this were but still I enjoyed them more than the previous book. With this one, I probably started getting into it about halfway to 3/4 of the way through, just because it felt like a little while passed until things started to build up, and then the end was quite full on and plot heavy, and I feel like that was done to basically point out the fact that there will be more in this series. Will I be continuing? No. Will I be continuing with this book series? No. I feel like I'm being super negative. I'm not meaning to be. So you can really tell in this that the author loves horses in her author photo, but I feel like she just sort of built the first half of this book around the fact that she loves equines, which leads me to try and tell you what this is actually about, and which I forgot to do with the previous book. In this one, there is a girl called Kate, who others refer to as Trader Kate, because allegedly her father tried to kill the king. Trader Kate then has to leave the city, and basically she's just living in this town as a relay rider, which is like a messenger on horseback, so they deliver important messages. And then there's also the whole night drakes element, where there are these drakes that terrorize the kingdoms and the countryside after nightfall. So you have some magic which can repel them, but basically you want to be inside a castle at nighttime, otherwise you're going to get fucked up. So yeah, that was interesting. I will say the world was quite enjoyable and it felt consistent throughout, but yeah, again, didn't feel very action-packed for about this many pages, and then the action started to sort of pick up, and there were a few like intrigue things happening in the court. It's dual perspective, so one's perspective is from Kate and one is from Corwin, I think his name is. I can't even remember. Yep, Corwin, who is the prince, and stuff happens with him as well. So there are things happening in this. It just didn't happen sooner, I think. Once again, I didn't hate this book, and I hate to be negative towards books, but at the same time, for originality's sake, do a bit more, maybe. Moving on, and I just realized that I actually read 7 books in this month. The next book I have to talk about is An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, and this is a book that I was pretty highly anticipating because of the amount of hype that this series does get, and that made me buy the first book and want to pick it up. And also, I just love this cover with the cat and stuff. I still don't really know what the cat is in reference to in the story. I might have just missed it, but if you know the relevance of the cat, drop that in the comments down below. In this one, we follow 2 different perspectives as well. We follow Leia, which is how I just pronounced it the whole way through, so if that's wrong, I apologize, who is a scholar girl who becomes a slave and gets pulled into this Rising's plot to try and overthrow the current empire. We also follow Elias, I pronounced it Elias in my head, so again, sorry if that's wrong, who is a soldier in the Empire, but whose main secret is that he is an unwilling part of the Empire. He doesn't want anything to do with it, he wants to try and escape, but then events happen and he can't because of fate. Fate plays a major role in this book, and I love stories that try and grapple with fate and people in the story that go, why can't I just do this? And fate's like, because it will loop you back around to do this. And then they're like, well, is anything I do my choice? And then fate goes, yeah, but nah, but yeah. So I enjoyed that element of this book. The other elements of this book that I did also enjoy were the whole school/training setting. I love books like Nevernight and Red Sister and Harry Potter for giving us that glimpse into another world through a school setting. This does that for a little bit as well through Elias's perspective. I also really liked the challenge element which arises about this far, I'm guessing, through the book. So again, I love that element. All I will say is the second trial was heartbreaking and I was there for it. I also really love how at the start of the book, Leia is not brave and she admits to herself that she is not the brave person in her family. That was her parents who were part of the Rising, that was her brother who has been captured and basically catapulted her onto this journey, and not her. And I really enjoyed that refreshing aspect of a character, because I feel like lately in certain stories, you have the badass character who goes through some stuff, but, you know, is fine the whole way through. Leia was refreshing because she was not fine, and she was not brave. Now, even though I did enjoy all those things, this book ended up getting a 3.5 star from me because it took me a while to get into it, and also there were a few things that I was like, why? The first one being the love square. Why did we need that? Still not sold on it. It was a little bit weird, and also I feel like it was there just to create tension, but I don't know if it completely worked for me. The second major plot point that I was like, why over, was the commandant who was always angry and a terrible person, and we just don't know why she's like that. One of the main big bads in this book is someone's mother who is called the commandant because she basically runs the school. Throughout the whole book, she's a horrible person. I want to know why she is the way she is. So maybe in the other books you do hear that, but in this one we didn't find out why. And it just felt like she is evil just because. So overall, this book was about a 60-40 split. 60% I enjoyed it, I was there for it, 40% was me asking questions and going, why? But will I continue this series? Yes. The major reason being, I've heard some people say this series does get better the longer it goes on, and get through the first book and then the other books are great. I've also heard that Sabaa Tahir is brutal in her stories, and I like a little bit of soul-wrenching, twisting, breaking hardships. So I'm gonna keep on going with this series. Just don't ask me when I will complete it because I have no idea. So next up I have my 3 audiobook rereads. I am rereading the Obernewtyn Chronicles via audiobook because there are about 7 books, I want to say, in this series, and I just couldn't justify rereading an entire series via physical book when I had all these other books that I had to get to on my TBR. So audiobooks it is, and these audiobooks are incredible. You may have heard me mention in my November wrap-up that I completed the first book, which is called Obernewtyn, via audiobook, and that Isabel Carmody actually narrates them herself. She is the author. She does an amazing job. The production of the books are just insane. If you are looking for a good high fantasy / post-apocalyptic type series to sink your teeth into and you like audiobooks, try this one. So I completed The Farseekers, Ashling, and also The Keeping Place. So let me tell you a little bit about Obernewtyn so you can decide if you want to pick it up or not. This is the first book of the Chronicles, and basically in this one we follow the main character Elspeth as she journeys towards her future and her fate. Elspeth is a misfit, which means that she has abilities, so she can talk to animals, she can control people using her mind, she can do a whole bunch of things, and if you're a misfit, that's basically a reason for someone to burn you at the stake because you are seen as unnatural and shouldn't be allowed to live. So very brutal, but in this setting, the whole world has broken down. The Great White has happened, which is basically the death machines have blown the world to pieces, and this is society after that. It's a really good commentary on different social structures and different groups and, you know, like the biases that can come with that. And overall, I loved it. If you love special abilities, if you love journeys, if you love just high fantasy and really easy to read writing style, pick up Obernewtyn. So yeah, in this one, I think there is a bit of an adventure. I'm going to purposely be vague because I don't want to spoil it for you. Basically, they adventure in a lot of them to different places with different quests and things like that. But this one had a really cool games element in it about halfway through. And then in The Keeping Place, a major plot line that has sort of started brewing in book 2 arises, and the consequences of that appear in this one. I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed where the author went with this. I think so far in my reread is this one of my favorites because fate gets introduced in this one a lot, and Elspeth has to deal with, is her life her own? What control does she have? And all that goes with that. I will also briefly say that Elspeth as a main character is amazing. She's not your typical YA sort of protagonist. She has issues trusting people because of being a misfit, and she's basically like a bit of a loner, and throughout the series it's her trying to come to the terms that she doesn't have to do everything alone, and her character growth is amazing, and she's just one of my favorite main characters. She just is. So yeah, basically, it's a great series. Read it or listen to the audiobooks. It's up to you. Also, these all got 4 stars from me. I love them. Read them. And finally, my favourite book of the month that I read was The Red Queen by Philippa Gregory. Now, if you haven't heard of Philippa Gregory, she is a relatively well-known author of historical fiction, and she writes a lot about King Henry VIII and his family, his reign, all of that. This book is about his grandmother and basically her ambitions to put her own son, King Henry VII, on the throne of England. This book covers the topic of the War of the Roses, or the Cousins' War as it's also known, because in England, in this time period, which was in the 1400s, the whole succession thing and who's going to rule England is questioned. And you've got your main protagonist here, Margaret Beaufort, who has this holy vision and duty that she thinks she will either become a nun or put her son on the throne of England and sign her name Queen Mother. This book was interesting, and I really loved how it was done, because with historical fiction, generally if it's well-known history that they're writing about, you know how the story is going to end. And in this one, you know that her son is going to end up being the King of England. But for most of this book, and I'm talking like most of this book, you don't see that happening because of all the trials and tribulations and all the shit that she has to face and the ups and downs to try and get where she wants to be. So this book did end up getting 4 stars from me. The reason why I didn't get 5 stars is because the ending was quite abrupt. Now I know that Philippa Gregory has written a whole series on this time period. So she's got the Cousins' War, she's also got the Tudor Court novels. So yeah, besides from that though, one thing that I really loved too was about 2 or 3 times in this novel, there was a shift in perspective. So for the majority of the novel, we are in Margaret's head, and it's first person, present tense. We are directly seeing things happen as she is experiencing them, but there is this shift in perspective when the battles arise. So there are 2 times when we see the battle through men's eyes, basically, on the battlefield. And I love the effect it has, because throughout this book, Margaret is saying that she has this destiny and it's his will basically to put her son on the throne, and then you get these scenes of the battles and it's just hopeless. It downplays the moment of glory that she has been speaking about throughout the whole book and makes you question why the events even happened, because everyone is kin. And I love that element of this. It questions her as a protagonist and then slips back into her head, and you get sucked along again of how important this is to her and therefore to you as you're reading it. There is also a very strong sense of character. Margaret, you start off with her talking about her saint's knees. So basically she prays that much that she has what she calls saint's knees. Her knees are just messed up from kneeling all day long praying. Throughout this novel, she also references Joan of Arc and her influence on her own psyche. I also really loved her opposition, Queen Elizabeth, who is everything that she is not. So she is rumoured to dabble in witchcraft, and she got to be the queen via her beautiful looks and basically utilised all her strengths, which are not the same strengths that Margaret has. Margaret is pious and religious and believes she is of royal holy blood, and they are so opposite, yet at one point in this story they come together and make a marriage pact between their son and daughter. And I just really loved that. I loved the comparison between them and basically how they wanted the same things but they were so opposite. It was a cool element of this book. So that's it. Those are the 7 books that I read in the month of December. I feel like I rambled a little bit in this video, so sorry about that, but I had some thoughts. So I'm just going to wrap things up here. I've talked long enough. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!